Hello, everybody, and welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today is Friday, the 8th of May, 2020, and you know what that means. Well, of course you do. It's my friend Ron Hillier's birthday today. He's in the chat room. Everybody in the chat say, come on, everybody together. Happy birthday, Ron! In fact, I have an old picture. I'm going to embarrass Ron. I have an old picture. Not that Ron is old, but the picture of Ron is old. And here is my friend Ron holding the two shotguns on the right, and our friend Ed with his HK91 assault rifle on the left. That was probably 1984, 1985. Good times. Let's embarrass Ron. Yes, I agree. We should totally embarrass Ron. And so happy birthday to Ron. And I've got a lot of things to cover today. And there's Ron's reaction. Be careful, Ron. I have other photos. You know, 20 bucks is 20 bucks. So, hello, all my friends in blue. I see a lot of familiar names here. Sharon Idle, Wayne Lawrence, Stealth Mode, DHR, Street Speed. Welcome in, everybody. Of course, Ron and Tony Wallow, Blue Dog Ron, which is a different Ron, Francois Guibol, Rick Lakes, Jaitesh, Team CompuRepo, Donovan Williams, Gabriel Granados, John Craig, Merle Essex. Look at all those happy birthdays, Ron. I didn't know you were so popular. So I built a computer for Ron. We built it together, you and I. We all did that. And I'm going to benchmark this and see how well it does. I've got Windows installed and activated. All the Windows updates are installed. AMD chipset drivers are installed. The Windows 10 optimizer's been run. I've tweaked a little bit more, those few things I do by hand, cleared all the temp files out after all the Windows updates, put in the latest drivers for the graphics card, and then ran the Time Spy program benchmark from 3D Mark to evaluate, make sure that it runs okay and get a benchmark out of it. After we do that, I've got the X570 system here, and the folks over at Sabrent asked me if I would review their 1 terabyte Generation 4 PCIe. Now, the only Gen 4 PCIe compliant or compatible hardware I've got is this one motherboard, which is the AMD X570 chipset that I built the 3950X on with the GeForce 2080 Ti? No, just a 2080. So currently that has the Corsair MP600, which was the only Gen 4 drive available. They were the first ones to offer it. And it'll give you read speeds sequentially of about 5,000 megabytes a second. Now with Gen 3, you're at about 3,500 on the top end, on the expensive side. So when Sabrent reached out to me, I thought, I would be glad to review it and see how it compares against Corsair's MP600, because the Corsair unit is about $195, and it comes with a built-in heatsink. And Sabrent will sell you the drive or the drive with the heatsink. So the drive with the heatsink's $220, I want to say, about $25 more. And I'm curious how it compares performance-wise. So here's the 1 terabyte drive that Sabrent has sent me for review. If the camera will autofocus. There it is. And then this is the monster heatsink that goes on there. This thing is not screwing around. Look at this thing. It's huge. Much bigger than the Corsair heatsink, but you've got to put it on yourself. Just turn your monitor upside down. Anyway, I'm going to benchmark this a little bit later. A couple of contributions have come in, so let me say a thank you to all of these generous folks. Mira Ora contributed $10, our first contribution today, and says hello from Fedora 32 Linux. Thank you. Thomas Beckenstowe with a $2 contribution and a $20 contribution. Thomas, thank you so much. Mark Stevens contributed $5. Mike Yazzie with a $20 contribution. Thank you so much. And Richard Angeline with a $5 contribution. Thomas, you're waiting for me to get back to you on a computer build, right? Because I'm ready. I'm ready for you. Your number is up. So we need to talk. And thanks to all of you for the contributions and for all of your kindness there in the chat room. Thank you for being kind not only to me but to one another, so that we can really establish a strong sense of community here and a place to go, especially if you're feeling a little alone, or perhaps there's not a lot of people that you know locally that share the same passion and interest you have for technology. And we all have that in common here, regardless of where we're located. Given the fact that we're social distancing right now and sheltering in place, well, it's just another day for a guy like me. But for most of you, it's uncomfortable, and it's nice to have a little place we can escape to. And that's why today I'm kind of taking it easy. No new build today, but there will be a couple of new builds coming up here very soon. And PC Doctor wants to know how the new studio's coming along. I haven't really had any time this week to do much over there. I went to pick up the area rug today. It was supposed to be in yesterday. They told me somebody dropped the ball. Come back tomorrow. So maybe Monday I'll have time to get over there and get the area rug. And I figured I'll just get it, stick it. It's rolled up right now, so I just put it in the garage or something. I got to get the ceiling fan replaced and clean up the mess that makes, and then I can move all the equipment, put the area rug down, and then we can see if that impacts the terrible audio echo that I've got in there. As for today's audio, I'm still using NVIDIA's RTX voice noise suppression, but I initially had set it at maximum, and I've dropped it to about 50%. So hopefully the drop-offs and things won't be quite so abrupt. You guys will have to let me know how you think the audio is sounding today. I can crank the audio suppression up more or down a little less. Let me know what your ears prefer. A lot of people ask me about A+ certification. It's been a long time since I took my A+ test, and back when I took it, it was good for life. I just didn't know I was going to live this long. So the guy, you want to go to the guy to prep yourself for the A+ certification. That guy's name is Mike Meyers. Not to be confused with the Mike Meyers in the Halloween horror movie series, or the Mike Meyers, the Spy Who Shagged Me Saturday Night Live alumni. No. This Mike Meyers is a guru in A+ certification training, has a couple of books out, and just earlier today, did a live stream of Ask Me Anything. And if you're interested in that, there is a link to his recorded live stream that was on earlier today. It's got less than 200 views, which is a real crime. This guy is the real deal, and he will set you straight with your questions regarding certification. And if that's of interest to you, be sure and watch that later when we're done here. A couple other contributions. Thank you to Hugh Wong, contributed $2. He says, "Hey, Carey, I hope you have a great weekend." William Cregan with $9.99 says, "Hey, Carey, I watch you so much, my dog gets excited to hear you." Sad but true. That is not sad but true. Me and dogs, we have a special relationship. So it's perfectly natural. People are amazed at how their dogs just come to me. I'm one of their kind. Every once in a while, you get a dog that didn't get the memo, but it's pretty rare. They love me. John Craig has contributed £5. He says, "Cabin fever? We don't need no stinking cabin fever." Am I right? Or am I right? Honestly, if I was in a cabin somewhere, where would I go to get away from it all? So everything's fine. Everything's good over here. I hope you guys are staying safe and we get through this together. And look, I'm happy to see that things here in Phoenix are starting to return to normal. Barbershops and things were back open again officially today, with huge lines of people waiting or making reservations to get in and get a haircut. And so, it's on my to-do list. It's getting a little shaggy. But hey, this is life, man. I'm not here to find a date. I'm not here to impress you with my incredibly striking good looks. I'm here to entertain and educate you and to give you empowerment, if you choose to accept it, on how to take back control of your computer and potentially start a new career in it or expand the career you've got. Or if nothing else, just have a little wins, little opportunities of beating your computer at something, taking back control and feeling like I did this on my own. It's a wonderful feeling. And if I look a little scraggly in the process and that's what you're noticing, then you're not getting it. So in the meantime, hello to Zero Core and Mark Stevens, Dusan Packler, John Tam, Gabriel Granados, Superman G, and Jim G, Edwin Ojeda, Scott Hallinan, and Sharon Idle. I think I mentioned Sharon earlier. Thanks, you guys, for hanging in there, joining me today. We've got 318 people watching right now. And I'm going to fire up Ron's new computer. In a perfect world, this would have arrived today at Ron's house. But I don't think that's going to happen today because it's still sitting on my counter. But that's all right. We can enjoy and savor the moment of Ron drooling at the performance of what will soon be his in HD, so close he could almost touch it. I'm a little cruel that way with my friends. Let's fire it up and see what, we'll give it the beans, as they say. So let me move over here to input 2, camera 2 is what I call it. It's actually input 2. And I will minimize or reduce my video from camera 1. That's this camera right there. I will just put it, I always go to the right. There's no reason I can't go to the left. Let's power this bad boy on. I've already got it plugged in. You can see the fans are turning. I've added 2 Noctua PF12 fans. Those are like $25 a piece. Ridiculous. But they're good fans. And I just have a little cable management to do, really, and it's good to go. So I'm going to show you some benchmarks. I'm going to show you the performance of that AddLink drive. I'm going to show you the performance of the graphics card, which is just a bargain GeForce GTX 1660. We're really shopping at a price point here. Ron wants to do 1080 gaming with this. He doesn't want to utilize it as a workstation. He doesn't want to do any work with it necessarily. He just wants to game. And his system he's got now is like 7 years old. So I think it's time we get him bumped up a little bit here in modern times, because it won't go to waste. That much I can assure you. So here we've got the desktop up, and now I know why I put my video in the right, because all my icons are on the left. So I'll just put myself right over here for right now. And let's see, let's take a look at the Crystal Disk Mark numbers first. We'll see what kind of performance we're getting out of this solid state drive. Let me move it over so we can both watch it together. Let me close this window and move this one over here. Here we go. Watch these 2 top numbers. That's the big numbers of the top line performance, the best in the world's best scenario. This is the maximum you can expect out of this drive, which is a sequential transfer. Now I mentioned 3,500 megabytes a second. Sometimes 3,600 can be achieved, and that saturates PCIe Generation 3 NVMe. The Generation 4 can go theoretically up to 8,000. Right now the drives are pretty much hitting 5,000. The drives have some evolution to go. And those drives, all these PCIe Gen 4 drives, all have large heat sinks. And I'm not quite sure how important that is, but I'm sure it's not coincidence. So we're seeing really good numbers here. Ron got bumped up to this 2 terabyte AddLink drive because the gigabyte 1 terabyte NVMe drive I was going to use, again, shopping at a price, has a problem, which I need to revisit. I think the drive is defective and needs to be sent back, so I'm not worried about it. In the meantime, I did run benchmarks on the gigabyte SSD, and it was on par with the Intel 660p. If anything, I think the Intel 660p was a little tiny bit faster, and I've had really good past experience with the Intel SSDs, so I'm not quite sure I'll be going back to gigabytes SSDs anytime soon. It was just what was available. It was $120. The Intel 660p 1 TB drives are on sale today at Newegg with a coupon code. If you're a Newegg, if you sign up for their newsletter, like $12 off. So it's still more than it used to be 4 months ago, but the cheapest price I've seen in a while. And there's a limit of 2 per household. So I bought 2 myself, and I would suggest if you're in the market, it's a bargain and it's a good drive. Team Compu Repo says I'm getting 4986 megabytes a second on a Gen 4 NVMe MP600 from Corsair on his 3950X, which sounds identical to this build right here. And he's interested in the numbers we see as well. Well, we're going to find out here real soon. Once again, not to confuse you, we're running on the little computer right over here, this mini ITX build. I've got 2 more mini ITX builds coming up. And what's interesting to me is, after I built that glass case computer and I said it's available if anybody's interested, not a single one of you has asked me even for a price. But the mini ITX, that old case, I've had like 4 or 5 people reach out to me saying, hey, do you have plans for that? I could use it. I'm making notes of this mentally regarding the type of content I create because, well, everybody in the chat, well, not everybody, but a lot of people in the chat had very strong feelings whether I should build AMD or Intel in that glass case. None of you want it. That's an important lesson for me. When somebody's holding some money and he says, build this, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. But when there's people in the chat going, you should do this and you should build that, but they're not holding any money in their hands, step aside, son. In the meantime, it's a great little box and I'm real happy with it. I got everything done on that with regards to getting Windows activated, the drivers, the Windows updates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I ran the benchmarks on it. It did a little better in the time spy than Ron's build because it's a 1660 Ti versus a 1660. But it's a great, strong little machine. It's kind of cute. I understand a lot of my audience doesn't care for the glass cases. They don't care for the RGB. A lot of them are pretty much like me. But it is still available. And I might even take a loss on it just to get it out of here. Just saying. Now, in the meantime, let's take a look at the numbers. We got 3454 on the writes. I'm sorry, on the reads here on the AMD system, the Mini ITX. That's using the MSI Gaming Plus AC. It's a B450 motherboard. And what do we put in? An AMD 3600X CPU with the standard cooling fan. I ended up using the Evo Sphere RAM. Once again, we had an issue with the RAM I was intending to use with some compatibility issues. And I'm looking through my inventory of RAM, and all I have are 32 gig kits. I don't have any more 16 gig kits. There was a couple on sale, so I did order. I think I've got 4 more kits of 16 coming, so I should be good for a little while. On the Kids at Hope charity builds, I don't necessarily need to put in 32 gigs of RAM. I mean, they're barely running 8 right now. So on their builds, if I can bump them to 16, I think they'll do very well for, probably 7 or 8 years. Their needs are all Office, Word, Excel, email, printing PDFs, making PDFs, that sort of stuff. It'll fly through all that. So I've got another system ready to build for the Kids at Hope charity, system number 2, with a contributed 270, I think, series, 200 series Intel board that was donated by a viewer with the chip and even a Scythe cooler that was all used. They packaged it up and sent it. I can't remember who it was, but thank you for sending that. And there's our final numbers on the, once again, this is the AddLink 2 terabyte NVMe drive. Not to be confused with what we're going to do over here, which is the next gen, which is generation 4. Let's take a look at some benchmarks on the Time Spy. Remember, the Time Spy program was the one where I determined that the RAM was incompatible on a system that was sent in for repair. The RAM let Windows install, the RAM ran everything. Everything ran fine, except certain games would crash. And of course, the person who made this computer, who built it, just flummoxed. That doesn't make any sense. So there's some sort of weird compatibility with that RAM and AMD chip, since it did the same thing on this other build with a different motherboard. But the RAM is good. So that RAM will end up on an Intel system. Now, if it crashes on an Intel system, it'll get sent back to the manufacturer for RMA. But I suspect it's just a compatibility issue at this point. So let's run the TimeSpy program and see how Ron's system performs here. I'm going to have to close my window or significantly reduce it to stay out of the way. TimeSpy, if you want to run this demo on your computer, you can grab it from Steam. I think it was available for download somewhere from one of the major geeks or some, I don't even remember, one of those sites, but it's primarily promoted through Steam, and they want you to buy it, and you have to click a bunch of stuff just to get the free version, and it's pretty big. It's like 6 gigs of a download. So we're going to let that run. It's a beautiful benchmark. It's really nice to watch, and we'll get a score here. And everything you see me run, you can run yourself if you want to compare your system against some of the stuff I build. Remember that this was built to a budget, but I did a couple of little upgrades with the fans, doubling the storage and doubling the RAM because of the circumstances. And I know that it'll be that much longer before I hear from my good friend Ron saying that there's a problem or that he's run out of space or needs more RAM. This should set him up for quite some time. And I made him promise me that he wouldn't open it up and do anything to it for at least 3 months. Just enjoy it. Leave it sealed. Not that Ron isn't capable. He's very capable. I'm a little, and obviously it's his computer. He can do what he wants. But I'm a little sensitive when I take all this time and effort to make it perfect, and then immediately somebody opens it up and starts doing stuff to it. Like, couldn't you have at least enjoyed it for a little while? Couldn't you at least have verified how good it was working so that if you have any problems later after you do something, you know I didn't send it to you that way. Otherwise, how do you know? So, well, I kind of jokingly teased him about it. He was like, no, I'm gonna leave it. I won't open it. So I'm kind of humored by that, if you couldn't tell. A couple other contributions have come in. Thank you to Joseph Panariello for $5 contributions, and a $5 contribution. He says, "Here's some money for you." I don't hear that enough from people. Thank you. Tina McLaughlin contributed $15. Thank you, Tina. And Anthony Pagankoff with a nice $20 contribution. He says, Windows 10 charged me $100 for a family subscription of Microsoft Office with a new update. Do you know what's wrong? I hope you're doing well and your business is thriving. Well, no, I don't know why that would have happened. There should be a way for you to cancel that if you don't want it. I know we've talked a bit about these gray market software keys that they sell on eBay and other software sites, and that I don't condone them or promote them because it's not good for business. If you're a home user and you want to buy one of those cheap keys, there's really I've never heard of any story of any legal consequences from individuals. But with businesses, it's a different story. Businesses that are using the software to make a profit. Obviously, the software maker wants some of the money you've made from their software. And because you're a business and you're making, theoretically, a lot of money, it's worth going after you. Home users, in most cases, the ones that will buy these cheap software keys, don't have anything to take. So it's kind of a losing battle to go after them. So in that sense, well, I cannot be a voice of your moral compass. I can tell you that as a business owner, it is not in my best interest to sell or promote those keys. But the reality is, home users can probably source those keys and they will probably activate one time. And if you ever need to reinstall it for any reason, you're probably going to have to buy another key again. But the keys sell for as little as $10. And who knows what kind of key it is with regards to where it's being sourced from or what little hoops and tricks the seller may have you dance through to get it to activate. It's all part of the package. So I don't know what that $100 charge was for. I don't know why it would suddenly appear for no reason, unless you had signed up for some sort of subscription that was up for renewal. But you should be able to cancel that if it's something you don't want. We've got about 440 people watching live right now around the world. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. We're running the benchmark Time Spy from FutureMark's 3D Mark series. And this is something you can run yourself on your computer if you want to kind of compare what you've got to what we've just built here, and understand that we've built this to a price. You know, we're not overclocking it. We're looking for a value that will last, you know, 4 or 5 years in gaming, which is far more demanding than regular use. And I think 4 or 5 years is a reasonable expectation out of this build for its usefulness. Now, it'll still run after 4 or 5 years. It just may not run the latest titles or do it very well, depending on the development of games and how resource intense they become. The size of the installs is getting bigger for some of these games, and the demand placing on the graphics card is also becoming more demanding. So systems built 4 or 5 years ago, they don't run slower today. They're just being asked to do more today than they were asked 4 or 5 years ago. So with that logic, I figure he's got 4 or 5 years before it starts to feel sluggish based on the demands the more recent titles will eventually place on it. But a lot of that can be alleviated very easily by a simple graphics card upgrade. And unlike his old case, we can put a full-size graphics card in here. You just pop that card out, put the new one in there, hook power up to it, install your driver, and get back to work. It's that easy. You know, a 2080 Ti for $1,250 will fit right in there and be more than the cost of the rest of the computer. But you can do that if you want to. Jim Maloney says, I've got an i7 4790K overclocked at 4.7 gigahertz. Is there any reason to try and get more? Look, you can buy a brand new 10th gen Intel chip that'll go 5.3 stock out of the box with you doing nothing. Most people that I find on the internet that are overclocking don't really have a good reason to do it. They just see it as something fun to do. I very rarely run into anybody in the real world who benefits from an overclock. Anthony Remus, on the other hand, the gentleman I had on that builds systems out of Las Vegas, overclocks his systems for clients that do often rendering and things like that, that can be more productive with a bit of an overclock. And he's got to support those systems. And he has to keep spare motherboards on hand. You know why? Because they fail when you push that much voltage through them for a long period of time. They fail more often than if you don't. And motherboard models constantly change, so Anthony has to buy several of a particular motherboard in order to make sure he's got one if his customer needs it. So he's not doing what I'm doing. He's got to charge a lot more money because he's taking on a lot more support and a lot more likelihood that the support's going to be needed. As such, he's got to keep parts on stock, and he's got to be available to walk his customers through particular issues. Stuff I don't want to deal with for any amount of money, quite frankly. So we'll let Anthony keep doing that. For the rest of us, mostly overclocking is just a hobby. It's something to do. And because I run a business, I'm representing a real tech business. I'll leave that, what I call nonsense, to the other hobbyist YouTube tech channels, of which there are countless. And I will try and focus unique content dealing with the practical nature of staying in business and how you lose money and go out of business by confusing a hobby with a job. Our Time Spy end result is 6135. Not a great number, not a terrible number. It kind of falls right sort of in the lower middle. And this computer, you know, again, built to a price. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anything with storage that fast, with that much memory, with this kind of graphics, at anywhere near the price we paid, looking at all the pre-builts available, because there's a premium added on to those. So we're not here to set any records, but we are here to be practical and say, look, not all of us can afford a $1,500 gaming machine. So what would be reasonable? We don't want to build something so cheap that we have to upgrade it 6 months from now. And we don't want to build something so expensive that it's at half its value in a year from now. So I would put this sort of at the lower end of the middle. And again, it's relatively quiet. It kind of cranked up. The graphics card made a little bit of noise there during the parts of that test, but nowhere near what Threadripper sounds like. And at nowhere near the cost. It's a lot lighter. No RGB. Looks good. I'm very, very happy with this build. I'm happy how it came out. I got 2 more mini ITX cases coming, and both cases look beautiful. One's from NZXT, and it can actually hold a little liquid cooler in there. And the other one is from, is it Vantex? They both look beautiful in the photos, and hopefully they'll look as good in person. I've not yet selected any parts for these builds. I was struck by the case, and I was also interested in the popularity of the interest that I received in email feedback since I did this mini ITX build. So I'll do a couple more. When those are built, they'll be offered for sale as well. A lot of times when you see me build something, all I'm trying to do is recover my cost. And if I'm not getting any bites on it, if nobody else is asking, it may be worth it to me to lose a couple of $100 on it just to get the cash in so I can start the next project, which gives you a deal. So something to keep in mind. It's not always that way, but if you ever watch Fast and Loud where they flip cars, sometimes he'll take a loss on a car because he's got to keep moving forward, and if he's got to cut his losses, that's, you know, he thought something had value, but nobody's buying it. What's he going to do? Sit on it? I mean, you can, I suppose, but you start running out of room, you run out of space. So it's important to keep things moving forward, even if it means taking a bit of a loss. I mean, I can't do that consistently and stay in business, but I can do it once in a while, and just putting it out there. Food for thought for people who don't necessarily want to wait 4 months for a custom build. You can take something I've already got and have it shipped out almost immediately. So think about that. Let me close this window out since we've got our Time Spy results done, and I can make myself a little bigger now. There we go. And I don't know, was there anything else? I ran the Prime 95 on here, and it started to get warm. I think it got up to about 87 degrees. But I find it really difficult to differentiate AMD's math since it's not very straightforward. But there's really nothing I can do about it. If the system's, when it's pushed hard for that length of time, is going to run a bit hotter than I like, there's not a whole lot of options I have here. When the system's not pushed that hard for that length of time, heat is not a problem. In fact, it never really became a problem. I just internally feel like 87's a bit warm for a little box like this, but I don't think, like I can't tell if it was throttling or not. I just can't tell. It ran. It did its job. So I don't know what to make of that like I can with an Intel system. And because of the limitations both on our budget and of the case, not like I can fix it anyway. That's the way it's going to be. And I think it's going to be fine. And if not, well, you know, Ron can send it back. I'm fine with that too. Let me take a quick look here in the chat and see what I've been missing. A couple more contributions have come in. Kevin Arsenault with a $20 Canadian contribution. Thank you. He says, keep it going. Mira Ora again with another $10 contribution. Says, I forgot to give an update. I am fully recovered from COVID-19 and now just waiting out the rest of the quarantine. Very good. Your immune system is stronger. And like 97% of the population, you have survived it. So well done. We're glad you're still with us and you've got that behind you. Michael Dane with a $10 contribution said he just built a new computer, an i7 9700K with 32 gigs of RAM. He says it meets his needs, and thanks for the inspiration for the build. Hey, right on, Michael. That's awesome. Glad to hear. Every time one of my viewers tells me that they were inspired to build, and they did, and it works well, of course it works well. Relying on you to do it. You know, if you want something done right, do it yourself. The Brain 49 contributed $6.50. Says, Carey, I love what you're doing. I learned a ton watching your videos. Hey, thank you, The Brain. Appreciate that. It's not just a name. It's a life mission, the brain. I see Catherine Anna Hauserman joining us. Welcome in, Catherine. Faris Almanai says hello, welcome in. Vern Mahorny's there in the chat. Dusan Packler. John Davidson joining us from Thailand. Welcome in, John. Always good to see you, my friend. John was a big promoter of the Threadripper build from a couple years ago that is now at my sister's place doing the video edits. My sister just posted the video edit that she did on the Eero router with Steve Bass. And my next interview with Steve Bass, we've got a lot to talk about. So I hope you guys will join us on that here in a couple of weeks. I'll have more information once we get it scheduled. It's not scheduled yet, but it'll be next week, I think, or the week after, because then we have a build we're going to do. Steve and I are going to build identical computers. I'm going to do it first. Steve's going to watch, and then Steve's going to repeat what he sees me do until we have both systems, both mine and his, together built. We're both going to install Windows 10 together. I think it's going to be fun. And I don't know what I'll do with the computer when it's done, but I have an idea of what to do with it, but I don't want to spoil the surprise. Not sure there's anything else left to do with this box. I'm going to do a little light cable management on it here. Let me shut this down first. And we'll wait for the fan to stop. And I'm curious as to what this boot time is. So if you want to grab your stopwatch and see what this thing, how long it takes to boot, let's fire it up. 3, 2, 1. Let's see how long it takes before we get to Windows. Yeah, I'd say that should make him smile. Yeah, I think so. If I hit the power button one more time, that will cycle it down just like hitting the mouse. It'll power down everything. I'll wait for the fans to turn off. And now I'm going to hook up the X570 build here. Now the X570 build is going to go to my sister so she can compare it to Threadripper and the X99 system that she has for doing the thumbnails for the videos. She does, not today's thumbnail is by Sherry McFarland. Sherry joins us often in the chat room, and I've offered rather to pay Sherry for her thumbnail, and she says, no, this is my way of contributing and supporting the channel. So, I mean, how awesome is that? So the virtual Hangout thumbnail was something Sherry did, and full credit to Sherry for that as well. Okay, so let's get this hooked up. I'm going to grab the video cable, and we'll plug that in over here. I'm really not digging this Be Quiet case. These have not been put back in, these brackets. And even though I don't need them, where am I going to put them? If I keep them in the case, I always know where they are. And this EVGA adapter enables you to move your power cables off to the side so it looks better, but in doing so, blocks these adapters. So I think I'm going to pull this adapter back off and run the cables back in a traditional way so I can put these brackets back in, because I really don't want to pull all this apart and put it into a different case, and then I'm stuck with this case. I like how the case looks on the outside, minus all the dust. I like how it looks on the outside. I just don't like the way the internals were laid out here. I'm a little disappointed. I think the build quality of the Be Quiet case is fantastic, but but working within it is a pain. Unlike yesterday's $99 glass case from Thermaltake, that level 20 VT, that thing was super easy to work on. In fact, with the glass panels off of it, it's essentially a test bench. It honestly is a test bench. It's exactly laid out, just like the test bench you guys have seen me use in the past, only it's elegant. So if you're looking for a cheap test bench, something that is open air that you can lay parts in real quick and check them, it's worth considering for $100. You know, full access to everything, super easy. All right, this power cable's not going to reach, so I have to plug it into the other side of this kitchen island here. We're going to move over here. We'll plug it in here and here. And then, of course, I need a keyboard and a mouse, so that's my dongle right there. And we'll plug it in any of the USB ports here in the back. And we'll fire it up. Oh, I guess I never hooked this fan up. It's not done yet. So let me go to the camera 2 input once again, or at least just make myself a little smaller so we can watch what's going on here. And I guess I can make the camera go a little bit more that way to get a better idea of what that looks like. Running into some obstacles. I was trying to show you the RAM glowing, but you guys have seen it in the past. So this is an X570 Aorus Elite motherboard from Gigabyte. If I turn the box around, you guys could actually read the make and model. I had, on the glass case that I did yesterday, I checked the motherboard for a BIOS update, and the last BIOS update was like 10 months ago or some ridiculous thing. So I'm a little disappointed when manufacturers don't complete, when they appear to abandon the product by not keeping the BIOS updates current. But I know it was an older model board. It was on sale on yesterday's build. But I was surprised that it had been that long and it's still no BIOS update. On the other hand, I guess nothing's broken that needs to be fixed, maybe? I don't know. Once again, this is the 3950X. We've got the Trident Royal Z RGB RAM with the mirrored finish, really over-the-top ridiculous. GeForce GTX 2080, and then an EVGA 1000 watt G2 modular power supply, which I had laying around. There's absolutely no reason why it needs that big of a power supply, but I got it, so I used it. Why buy one if I've got one? And I'm going to bring up the same benchmark. We've got Crystal Disk Mark here. I'm assuming it's the same version. Let me see if I can make the screen a little bit bigger for me. Full screen, please. There we go. So 7.0.0 G. I think there's a newer version, and just to be with the latest and greatest, let me plug my utilities flash drive in and compare what version I've got there. PC testing software. Yeah, it's H now, so we'll grab H. A lot of people ask me if I would sell my utilities or whatever. I can't legally sell these. These are all freeware. If you Google search the names that you see on the screen, you can download all these same utilities. Where do you download it? Use Google, you'll find it. Now, let me delete the old Crystal Disk Mark. Even CPUs is old. That's version 192 now. Let me pull that over because I know that one. CPU-Z 192. So to remind you of the specifications of this build, we'll run CPU-Z so you can get a closer look at the specifications of everything here. This just takes a moment to run. It's one of my favorite utilities because I get BIOS version, I can see all the RAM and empty sockets. So here we are with the AMD Ryzen 9 3950X. I'll go up here to main board. We've got the Gigabyte X570 Aorus Elite with BIOS version F12F, which was new as of last month. Well, I guess it's a month and a half ago. For memory, the specifications of the RAM and the serial presence device, or SPD, gives us all the detail of the manufacturer, the speed, etc. Graphics verifies our 2080 Super from EVGA. And that's about all I use on this. And now we'll run Crystal Disk Mark. This again has the Corsair MP600. And I think I went with 2 terabytes on this. I think I opened the wallet up on this one. Yeah, it's 2 terabytes. Another way you can tell what kind of hard drive or solid state drive is you can right click, go to Properties, and then go to Hardware. And then you can see here it says Force MP600. And then SanDisk Extreme, that's the USB flash drive I just plugged in. So if I go over here and I unplug it, if I say, let's eject that flash drive, I should get an update here where that's no longer available. So just so to verify that that's the proper hardware, let me pull the flash drive out because we don't want anything to interfere with our test results. And we'll again run this benchmark to verify the performance numbers. We then can use Acronis to image this drive to the Sabrent drive and then run the exact same test. So nothing changes, and we'll just compare the numbers side by side. How much does that X570 cost? Well, that's a good question. We've got the liquid cooler with the 3950X. The 3950X, I think, was $750 at the time. Now I think it's $700, or it's going on sale, if I'm not mistaken, for $700. Why there's a $250 price gap between a 3950 and a 3950X, it should be a big eye-opener for you guys, the way the marketing works with these manufacturers. AMD is no savior. They're not doing anything any differently that Intel's doing. The difference between a 3900X and a 3950X is not a 50% gain, but it's a 50% price margin increase, or at least it was, from 500 to 750, which I just find offensive, but they all do it. Intel does it too. So we've got that with the RGB Crystal Royal RAM from G.Skill is some of the most expensive RAM for that size and speed that you can buy in this category, but it's also very unique looking. But when I say most expensive, I mean by $20 or $30. It's not outrageous. It's, if a regular 16 gig RAM stick costs $60, then those are 85 or 90. So maybe not the best example because you're not just going to buy one, you buy them in pairs, and the pairs are like $20, $30 more than a pair of other RAM. The motherboard, pretty basic board, it's under $200. The power supply is overkill. I would never have put a 1,000 watt power supply in any system I've built, unless the customer specifically said, too bad, I want it. There's very little real reason in reality to have that. But it was something I had on hand, and I thought I'll just use it in this build. It's way overkill. We could easily get away with 650 watts. 750 if we want to be overly protective. 650 would be fine in this system. And then, of course, the Corsair MP600 that we're testing now is a couple $100 for a 2 terabyte drive, which is on par with the Samsung 970 EVO Plus that runs nowhere near this speed, right? So if you're given a choice to buy the 970 EVO Plus or to buy the Corsair MP600 of the same capacity and nearly the same price, the Corsair drive for Gen 4 is going to be faster on the X570 motherboard, and that's the only motherboard currently that supports Gen 4 of the PCIe standard, which the NVMe drive is using. That NVMe drive, I guess it'll work in a Gen 3, but it'll run at Gen 3 speeds, which is wasting your money. Now, AMD has new motherboards coming out, the B550 line, but they won't be compatible with the first 2 series of the Ryzen processors. Only the Ryzen 3, the what do they call it, Zen 2 or something like that. Those latest Ryzen chips will work with the B550 motherboards. You see, what people don't comprehend is by AMD keeping that socket AM4, people think, well, I have an easier upgrade path. Well, you don't really. The reason why Intel had to go from the socket 1151 to a socket 1200 for the 10th gen Intel chips is for more power consumption that the 10th gen chips require. So AMD is holding you back. They are holding you back, just like Windows has done for years, for compatibility reasons, instead of to continue the technical evolution as much as possible. Like Apple is infamous for just saying, none of this stuff's going to work anymore. This is the latest and greatest. By AMD sticking stubbornly to the AM4 socket, it restricts what they can put in there voltage-wise. And by adding the Generation 4 NVMe, they realized that we have to cut loose the first two series of chips because otherwise we're just going to be held back even further. So the path to easily upgrade comes with some consequences that for you may be a deal, but for somebody else might be a deal breaker. So to remain compatible also stifles just how far ahead you can continue to evolve. If you can remove all the backwards compatibility, you can evolve much, much faster. There's neither a right nor a wrong, but I think it's important to see both sides of that. There's our final numbers with the Corsair MP600. Let's make a little note in here. And we'll call this, let's see, I need this keyword, Corsair MP600. Now, this is a 2 terabyte drive, and I will tell you, it's no secret, that a 2 terabyte drive that's solid state, particularly NVMe, will run faster than the same exact drive with the same exact specifications of half the capacity. It's inherent in how the technology works. So even just comparing a Corsair MP600 1 terabyte Gen 4 to a Corsair 2 terabyte NVMe Gen 4, there will be a performance increase on the larger drive. So with that in mind, when we check the Sabrent drive, I have links in the video notes below this video for the Sabrent 1 terabyte drive that we're testing today and the MP600 drive that I don't have in here. I've got the 2 terabyte MP600, but to compare it online, I put the 1 terabyte MP600 in the link so you can see the price differential. So I want you to understand that you will most assuredly see smaller numbers with the Sabrent drive. This isn't a real fair comparison, but for me to go out and buy an MP600 for 1 terabyte just to do this test is ridiculous. Do know that the Sabrent 2 terabyte version of the same drive will be a little bit faster, and that's true of all manufacturers. Now, with that little disclaimer out of the way, let me finish what I was doing here. That's the Corsair MP600 2 terabyte results, and we'll save these results. We'll just do a function alt print screen. That should grab the screen. We'll bring up Microsoft Paint, and then we will reduce this really small and then hit paste. Now we'll save this screenshot and we'll put it under pictures and we'll call it Corsair MP600 2 terabyte .jpg. Very good. And then I'll close this, close this. So how am I going to clone an NVMe drive to an NVMe drive? Well, this motherboard does have multiple M.2 sockets, but I also have my favorite little gizmo, which is back here at my office. I have to grab it. This is the pluggable NVMe SSD enclosure, and it's completely toolless. In fact, let's go full screen here so you can see me a little better. I've demonstrated this on other videos in the past, but perhaps you've missed that one. Maybe you were sick that day. I keep it all in this box because, well, you could set it up to be kind of a permanent external storage. I use it as a tool. And so I always keep it empty, and I keep it all in the box with the USB cables back here, so I could do just this at a moment's notice. There's a little switch on the end here, and if I flip that switch, you'll see the whole thing just opens. No tools. Now I've got the drive and the heatsink. Obviously, I can't put the heatsink on in here. The heatsink's not an absolute requirement. but it's absolutely a good idea. And you can see these are sealed from the factory. Everything on this video and all my videos, when I'm live, is completely unscripted. We will often put up an edited version of some of the content at a later date, but what you are watching right now is live and unscripted, and you will experience what I experienced as I experience it, without all the fancy scripting and all the fancy editing. You'll see there's a little sticker that Acronis is included as a download if it'll focus. Is it going to focus? And in fact, a free version of Acronis is available from every SSD manufacturer, at least every major one, except Samsung, who makes their own, which I find to be quite interesting. So if you are looking to clone a solid-state drive, or heck, if you were looking to clone your mechanical drive and replace it with an M.2 solid-state or a SATA solid-state, regardless, Acronis will clone it for you. And the fact that you can do it for free with the purchase of the drive, can't beat the price. So we're going to do that now. So here, wait a minute. That's weird. It's it looks like an external case, but I guess it's just packaging. Yeah, it's just it's in a metal case, just for packaging. That's weird. It says to unlock the speed. What do I do with this? I don't know. It's got a little felt. Look at me, I'm reviewing the packaging. Well, I'll tell you what, Sabrent really went above and beyond. This is some of the nicest packaging I've ever seen. What a shame it goes into the trash. The drive has got a little weight to it. It's got chips on both sides of the drive. Obviously, the sticker side is the side that faces up when you're installing it, and the side that the heatsink would attach to. And the rest of this, I think, is just empty. Yeah, it's just foam. Put that back in there. Now, I've never, there's a little booklet. I don't think we need that. I've never put a Gen 4, I mean, the only Gen 4 NVMe SSD I've ever used is the one in there. So I've never put one in an external enclosure before, and I assume they're backwards compatible with Gen 3, but why would anybody do that? So I'm assuming all this is going to work fine. I don't know. First time for everything. You'll see that just goes in. And there's a little rubber piece that sticks up that you bend back, and it holds the drive in position for us. And then we just slide it back together, and it locks closed. It doesn't matter which side is up. And that will just slide and lock, and we're ready to start using this. I've got a USB cable here. And this USB, it has a Type-C to Type-C in the box, and then the Type-C to Type-A. I find the Type-C to Type-A is just a bit more reliable. For some reason, I've had some issues with Type-C to Type-C. Technology still have some maturing to go, or I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe a little of both. And let me plug it into any USB port here. I'll pick a blue one, so we have a fast USB 3.2, whatever they call it, plug. Then we'll go back to making myself a little smaller on screen. Whoops. So I can see what it's doing. It's not doing anything, okay? So now I can go to, let's see, we'll right click. Wait a minute, I gotta see this bigger. Full screen projector, there it is. I think we go right click on the start button, disk management. Hopefully it sees the drive. It does see it. It says you must initialize this disk because it's brand new out of the box. It has no partition or format. I'm going to click OK. And now it shows the 1 terabyte here. I right click on that, click New Simple Volume, and click Next, click Next, click Next, and click Next, and click Finish. And there it is. We're ready to rock and roll. Now, I was just doing that to make sure I can see the drive. Those steps are unnecessary if your goal is to clone, because the cloning will automatically partition and format. But at this point, if I wanted to use this as an external storage device, it's ready to rock and roll. If I go to this PC up here, you'll see there it is. And in fact, if we run just for giggles, we're going to be limited in performance by the USB port speed. But I'm just kind of curious what kind of speed we'll get through USB out of this. And it is going to heat up quite a bit. This is a pretty intense test. So we'll go down to drive D. That's the external drive. We'll do all the tests here, and let's see what kind of numbers it pulls up, keeping in mind that our bottleneck is going to be the USB port, not the drive. So don't expect to be blown away, except if you appreciate the throughput through the USB port. If you've had a computer since USB 1, well, there's no comparison at 440, right? Now this drive should be able to hit 5,000 or pretty darn close to it when I install it in the motherboard. In fact, I could probably just remove the heatsink there that's covering up one of the M.2 slots and plug this drive in and still boot from this main C drive and run it that way. But my preference is to make the test exactly identical, and to do that I want to do an Acronis image, but I just wanted to see the numbers through the USB port. Those numbers will basically be the same no matter which SSD you use in this external enclosure, whether you're using a cheap Intel or a Gigabyte NVMe or the expensive Samsung 970. Either way, you're butting up against the maximum performance of the USB port, which is far below even the slowest NVMe drive. You'd have to go to Thunderbolt or something to go faster than that. David R. Officer contributed $5 Canadian. Hey, thank you, David. And let me see if I've missed other contributions. Oh, I have. Rick Szabos contributed $5. He says, I just finished off a Carey-inspired tortilla pizza, and it was fantastic. Now you're making me hungry. Well, that's running. I think I'm going to refill my Coca-Cola. I wonder how many more times I'm going to be asked if Coca-Cola sponsors me. I'm letting my camera decide all the lighting automatically, which is why today's video may appear to have a slight blue tint to it. And I'm doing that because I'm just curious, because I normally control all the settings manually, and I'm just kind of curious how the camera will look apart from the blue tint with regards to sharpness and depth of field. You know, compared to my manual settings. I guess while I'm waiting on that, I'll pull the shrink wrap off of the heatsink here. And we'll see if that drive will even install without any interference from the heatsink, because the heatsink's pretty large and the graphics card kind of overlaps it a little tiny bit. So I'm kind of curious if we're going to have any fitment issues. Again, the heatsink is not absolutely required, but it's better to have and not need than to need and not have. In general, if you're writing a whole bunch of stuff constantly to your SSD, then the heatsink should be considered. But if you're just using it like a normal person, it probably won't get very hot for very long to impact any noticeable variance in the transfer rate for any length of time that really matters for most people. Yeah, so the camera's all on auto settings. If I move the camera back to manual settings, you'll see the brightness and the color tint change quite a bit. I guess I'll leave it there because as the sun is going down outside, it's becoming more noticeable. The blue is getting stronger. And that's the difference with auto settings and manual settings with this camera, apparently. Okay, almost done with the test. And again, that's really just showing you the maximum throughput of the USB port. It is not representative of the performance of the drive whatsoever. Now I've got an Acronis bootable image flash drive here. And hopefully it will see all of this hardware. I know there is a newer version of Acronis, a slight bump up. I don't know what they added. It's usually drivers. So I'll be kind of curious if off booting from this flash drive, if it will see both the USB drive and the internal Gen 4 NVMe SSD. If it does, I'll be very impressed. So there's our final numbers with the USB transfer speeds. I'm not going to bother saving this because it doesn't really matter. And then we'll shut this down. Then I'm going to take my flash drive and I'll plug it in. We'll find a spot back here somewhere. That looks good. And then we'll turn this back on and we'll hit, what is it, F12, I think, on Gigabyte for the boot menu. And we'll select the proper USB drive to boot from. If you want to avoid confusing yourself, to avoid the confusion, just plug in your bootable Acronis disk so that you don't have to choose one. And then after Acronis boots, you can plug in the USB drive that you want to clone to. But you've got to keep the Acronis drive plugged in at all times that you're using it. And I have apparently missed the opportunity to boot because it looks like it's already loading Windows and I did not select what drive I wanted. If this should happen to you, if you're just not able to hit the key on time, you can instruct Windows 10 to boot from the flash drive on its next boot. And the way we do that is we'll go to the start button and we're going to hit that little gear icon right there. And we're going to go to update and security. And over on the left, we choose recovery and restart now. And it's not restarting yet. It wants to know what you want to do. I want to use a device. And it should find it. It says, oh, you want to use the SanDisk Extreme Pro Partition 1? Yes, I do. And now it's going to reboot and start automatically with that USB flash drive without me having to worry about pressing F12 at the right time or adjusting anything in the BIOS. Jean Tem contributed $5 and says, thank you for all your quick tips and how-to videos. Well, thank you for the contribution. And as a reminder, we do have the quick tips channel. So if you just want those quick, short videos that just answer a very common question, all the frequently asked questions that I get turned into quick tips videos. And those are on the quick tips channel. And I'll be sure that there's a link to that in tonight's video notes. Please subscribe to it. Most of those videos are right around 5 minutes long. A few go a little longer, a few are a little less, but they get right to the point. It's not me standing up here talking for hours. So there's our Acronis. We want to go to Tools, and we want to do a clone. An automatic clone is fine. We want to go from the 2 terabyte, 1.8, that's it. MP600, that's our source. And we want to go to, always make sure you get the order correct. We want to go to the Sabrent Rocket. I love how the Acronis software has found all the drivers we need, even though this is Generation 4. It's fairly new tech. Acronis is right on top of it. And this isn't even the latest version of Acronis. There's a small update to this that I have not yet updated my flash drives and tools to, because I don't think I need it, and I've been busy. Now, because we partitioned and formatted the drive, the external drive already, it thinks there's data on it because it's not. If there were no partitions on it, we wouldn't get this message. It's letting you know that If we select to go forward with this, if we click OK, any data that exists on there will be permanently erased. Well, we don't have any data on there anyway, so we'll just click OK. And it says, the drive is completely empty right now. And when we're done, it's going to have these 3 partitions. Does that look right? Yes, it looks right. You'll see it resizes the partition. We're going from a 2 terabyte drive to a 1 terabyte drive. Acronis has no problem going from the bigger drive to the smaller drive and then auto adjusting the partitions. So all I have to do is click proceed, and this should happen rather quickly, much faster than reinstalling Windows with no reactivation required. Everything carries over, every icon, every program, and every setting. And if you had a virus, every virus and every temp file, you're getting it all. It's basically an exact mirror that's been adjusted to fit, as long as that 2 terabyte drive has less data on it than the size of the drive we're cloning to. So if this 2 terabyte drive had 900 gigs of data, no problem. But if it had 1100 gigs or 1.1 terabytes, it can't fit onto a 1 terabyte drive. You see what I'm getting at? So Acronis has no problem going from a bigger drive to a smaller drive, as long as the total amount of data on the first drive that you're cloning from is equal to or less than the size of the drive you're cloning to. It doesn't matter if you're going from a hard drive to a solid state drive, or a solid state drive to a solid state drive, or an NVMe drive, solid state to a non-NVMe, or any direction therein and any combination thereof, of any size, big or small. You can go bigger, go smaller, you can go home. Michael Okonkwo has contributed $2. Hey, Michael, thank you. The latest big update for Windows 10 should be coming out, it looks like, around Memorial Day here in the United States, somewhere in that 3-day weekend. It looks like the next big Windows 10 update is due out. It usually comes out in April, but the whole COVID situation has postponed it by a month. And of course, this is all unofficial, but it's looking like right around Memorial Day weekend that big update will be available. Over time, you'll get it automatically, but the day it's released, you can manually go and grab it if you want to. I typically will do that here to demonstrate it. We've never had a problem installing any of these updates. You hear a lot of people complain about updates, but I think most people who have update problems either have some old software or have tweaked around with their registry and things they shouldn't be messing with, turning off Windows services and other ill-advised things that they falsely believe is giving them more control and more power, but ends up biting them on the butt, and then they blame the Windows updates for not working. And I'm not on board with that. I have numerous customers that I have maintained for years, and I will tell you it's very rare that we ever have a Windows update cause a problem universally. We might get one computer that has an issue, and that tells you it's a computer issue, not an update issue. But that being said, that comes from my experience as a professional technician, not from sitting at home going, well, my computer had problems. Well, I don't know what you did to your computer, and I don't know what the history of your computer is, so I can't sit there and tell you that your complaints are justifiable. I can tell you that the clients that pay me that I support, we generally don't have issues with Windows updates. And if we did, you'd hear about it. So I strongly advise people to grab the updates to maintain your security, because without the updates, you remain insecure. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, if you believe the updates cause harm. Because leaving yourself unpatched also causes harm. In most cases, I think people have pre-existing conditions that the update forces them to acknowledge. Just because you didn't know you had a problem doesn't mean it wasn't there. And if your computer has an issue, it's doing you a favor by letting you know there's something wrong here. Over the long term, the sooner you know about it, the sooner you can fix it, and the more secure and safe you'll be going forward. That's the way I see it. Now, when Windows updates cause crashes to 80% or more of the people downloading it, it's a different story. But very rarely has that ever happened. Now, The Acronis image is done. We've copied everything in that little short period of time. I'm just going to click OK. And at this point, I don't have to close the window. I can just shut everything down. My OCD sometimes gets the better of me. So we'll click the X there, and we're back to a DOS prompt. Hold the power button in, and that should shut off. All the lights have gone off. I will come over here, unplug my Acronis rescue disk here, and set it off to the shelf. And we'll go full screen back on camera 1 again so you can see what I'm doing. There it is. Is this warm? Yeah, it's a little warm. It's not terrible, but it's definitely, you can definitely tell it's been used. Once again, I'll hit the little switch on the back. That will open this up. We can take the drive out. This drive is now an exact duplicate of the drive we've got installed on the board. And so when we replace or swap out these drives, it's going to boot with the same exact look, wallpaper, icons, programs. You cannot tell the difference. But our free space will be significantly reduced going from a 2 terabyte to 1 terabyte. And then, of course, we can run the performance test and see what kind of performance numbers we get. There's a little catch on here that sometimes it just kind of gets a little hung up on. I don't know why it's doing that. It's like right there. It's got like a little recess or a little tab that sticks out, and it's got to be like compressed. And that keeps it, you can kind of see it right there. It's got to get pushed in. That keeps it from falling out and hitting the floor, so it's actually a good thing. Now here again, and you'll be able to see this a little better when I take it out, if I just move that little rubber grommet right there at the tip of my finger, if I pull it back, it releases the drive. Then I can just pull the drive straight out. Easy peasy. And I'm done with this. I can put it away, put it back in its box, and it's available for me to use the next time. And you'll see when I put it back in, I've got to push that little tab in. I kind of do it when I don't mention it to you. So I kind of push it in like that, and then I can slide the other side in and close it. And it should. It's supposed to lock. Oh, well, this is what happens when you put it in backwards. So even though this goes in backwards, you do see there's an arrow, right? And you do see there's an arrow down here. Those arrows are supposed to line up. So yes, you can install it backwards, and when you do, it still works. I can prove that. I just did. Now we'll line the 2 arrows up, and that will lock, so I can't open it. And that'll probably come out a lot easier now too. I bet you it won't snag. Yeah. So and now I dropped it. So if you use it the right way, it works a lot better. Yeah, that's all there is to that. I love it. And there's no moving parts on this. There's nothing to worry about dropping it. There's really nothing to break. I'll set that aside for right now. Now, as for this heatsink, let's take a look at what this looks like. Daniel Schroeder's contributed $14.99. Hey, Daniel, thank you for that. Again, we've got some documentation. We've got this monster. Wow, it's heavy. It's got some thermal tape underneath there to help with the transfer. What else do we have in here? There's a big old bracket right there. Set that down. Little thing of thermal tape also. You can certainly cover you with thermal tape. There are some screws and a driver included in the packaging. You can see it's kind of subtle. So don't just throw the package out. You're going to need those screws to secure the heatsink down properly. It's a fascinating design. Now, I'm not quite sure if it matters if you put the drive on like that or like that, I guess you want it so the logo's facing up. And they kind of show it this way in the package. So you can see how much depth that adds to the size of the drive and how that might interfere with like a graphics card. You know, like in this spot right here, it looks like it'll be clear. I've installed down here for some reason. Oh, I know why I did that. This built-in heatsink would have to be removed to make room for the other, for the Corsair MP600. So I thought it looked better to keep the cover on. You can't really see it very well in the video. There's a little cover over that M.2 slot, and it matches the board. So the reason I moved it down was the one below didn't have a cover. And I thought, well, that looks ugly. Let's put this drive in there. And now they both look good. But the problem is, this may be too thick. Yeah, it is too thick. It's not going to fit down there. It's not going to work. So to test this, what I'm going to have to do, first of all, is there's, like I said, there's this thermal tape. And we can take the thermal tape off. Not the thermal. There's like a clear peel off sticker that exposes the thermal tape, and it's there to protect it from dirt and debris, so it maintains is absolute clean to make sure that we're transferring the heat thoroughly and efficiently. And we'll just set that on there, and it's kind of sticky, so we'll make sure I line it up well. I've got to guess. You know, we can't go too close to the edge. Got it upside down too. We want to go this way with it. We want the label, the Sabrent label, facing up. And we want to align the back of it so that the socket here has room to be inserted without these heat pipes hitting the plastic socket on the motherboard and preventing it from going all the way in. So while these heat sinks might look cool, you've got to take a little extra caution when you're setting them up, or you're going to find yourself in a position where you're going to be cursing at it. I'm going to set that there for right now. This is going to sandwich the SSD down onto the heatsink. So you'll see it's got the four holes here. That's for the 4 included screws. They're going to lock into the side of this heatsink. There's two screw holes on each side. And you'll see that little half moon shape right there. That's to lock down. You're going to secure, got to look at this for a minute. When we put this on like this, the half moon shape here is going to line up with the half moon shape on the drive so that you could put the screw in to secure it down. Now this adds another bit of complexity in that the screw that's included with the motherboard may not be long enough to travel the distance in that gap. A lot of times that's the length of the screw, just that little space in the gap. So I think what they've done is they've included that 5th screw right there. Should be a standard M.2 screw that's a little longer, since I think the stock one that comes with most boards isn't going to be long enough. Now you'll see I've not read any of the documentation. I may be doing all of this completely wrong, but again, as a field technician, you're expected to hit the ground running and to figure things out as you go, and clients are waiting. Now, a typical review site here on YouTube will go through the documentation. They will parrot to you all of the marketing materials that the company wants you to know about. Me, as a real practical working technician, my clients don't want me to read documentation books to them. They want me to get a job done and get the hell out. So that's what I'm attempting to replicate here, so you guys have a better idea of what it's like to be a real working technician. And it does mean quite often it's up to you to figure things out, because it's often faster. And then in the rare occasion where you can't, then to save time, to not waste any more time, you refer to the manual as you need. But oftentimes these manuals are very poorly written in general. I don't know how Sabrent's manuals are written because I haven't read any of them. There's nothing more frustrating than going to the manual and it says, never to price twice flexible. Well, that was helpful. So I've got the driver. We'll use the enclosed driver right here. And we'll start by, first of all, I've got to remove the protective tape once again on the thermal tape on the other side, right? We've already got thermal tape on the heatsink side. Now on the bracket, we've got more thermal tape. We'll take that off. If you don't take that off, the heat doesn't transfer as well. So then what's the point of using it? Now we'll just put these two pieces together and give them a little squish. Oh, that squished real nice. Yeah. So that side's going to plug into the board, and that side you're going to screw down right through that little half moon shape. Right there it is. So while it's together like that, you'll see 4 of these screws are the same and 1 is different. The 4 that are the same, you're going to pick those and install them into each of the slots there. Now, look, this little screwdriver is better than nothing, but it's a pain. I would much prefer to use my GIS screwdriver. Most of you probably don't have one of these. But this gives me magnetism and a bigger handhold. It is going to make this job so much easier. However, if you don't have the right driver to use, this is better than nothing. And that's about the best I can say about it. And these just are unscrewing from the package. They don't pop out. You have to unscrew them out. And this is a magnetized driver. All the drivers you see me use, whether they're battery operated or manual, they all have the magnetized tip to avoid the screw dropping, which you just saw. You'll see that screw doesn't fall off. It's staying on the end of the driver, and it's a very small screw, which really stinks if you drop it in carpet or something, because it can be really hard to find. If you have a vacuum cleaner with a nozzle attachment, you can put some nylons over it, and you can go over the carpet and it'll get stuck to the nylon without getting sucked into the vacuum cleaner. But if you have a magnetized tip driver of the right size, you don't have to worry about it dropping at all. Also, if you don't work on carpeting, which is always a bad idea with electrostatic discharge, you know, even when this falls and hits the floor here, it's still a little difficult to see because of its small size. Come on. Okay, last one. Jean Tim contributed $5 and says, hello, Carey. Pluggable discovered an incompatibility with certain NVMe drives used in their enclosure and now offered an updated version of it. Good to know, especially if I ever encounter that. I've only had to use that pluggable enclosure about half dozen times since I've owned it, so it's not a tool I use very often, but every time I've used it, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've not experienced any incompatibility issues, but I'll try to remember if I do have any problems that there's an updated version. Though that's pretty common in the world of the latest tech, like NVMe drives. You know, the average customer does not have an NVMe drive yet, at least not in a desktop computer. And I'm looking forward to the day that that becomes the standard, because the technology is ready and it's so far improved with regards to performance, reliability, ease of installation. You know, there's no cabling. I love it. I think these are great. Now you'll see it's a pretty thick drive now. What went from about the size of a stick of gum is now this monstrosity. But the good news is, the bigger the heatsink, the better the heat dissipation, and the cooler it runs, the faster it runs with regards to heavy usage. Under ordinary usage, it would never get that hot to begin with. However, this is Gen 4, and Gen 4 does get hot. It just does. Let me move this over a little bit. Okay. So we're going to take out the Corsair drive because I want to be very clear when you see this boot that we're booting from this drive. Even though I won't be able to plug into that socket, I want to show you the size of the heatsink on the MP600 I've got in here. Oh, that's interesting. That MP600 is right up against the back of the video card. Like that just barely fits. I didn't realize that when I built this. Wow. So I'm going to unplug this computer. I don't want any power going through it when I work on it. And I'm going to unplug this graphics card and bring it out. The graphics card has to come out to get that existing drive out. And I can tell you, this is significantly taller. So if that graphics card just barely fits in with the current MP600, there's no way I can plug the graphics card in with this drive in that slot. I have no choice but to remove the heatsink and replace it with this altogether. Not that that's a terrible thing. I was going for a certain look here, but clearly when it's impacting the performance or the usability of the computer, then you've got your priorities screwed up because the look shouldn't take priority over performance. So we're going to take out these two screws that hold the graphics card in. And I'll set this over here. And there's a little release back here I have to press in, and I should be able to just wiggle that right out. Now, I want to show you the size difference just to give you some comparison. This is the Corsair MP600. This is how it comes out of the box. You don't have to connect the heatsink. It's just already installed. You can see there's little clips. If you wanted to take it off, you can pull it back and pull the heatsink off. And this is Sabrent's heatsink. So they're both the same length of solid-state drive. But you can see Sabrent's heatsink is a little longer and quite a bit thicker. If we set them side by side, you can see there's quite a height difference. So for me to get this drive to fit, I cannot put it back down here. The graphics card is going to hit the top of this before it seats into the socket, and that's all she's going to write. So I'm going to have to remove this cover and use the top M.2 slot. They're both the same speed. Sometimes on some motherboards, different M.2 sockets run at different speeds. Now look at how shallow. Remember I told you how shallow the screws were? That screw is not deep enough to go through this. You see, it's gonna get to that point right there and stop. There's no way you can secure that with the enclosed screw that came with the motherboard. So there's a couple of downsides. On top of that, there's about a $20 price difference on the Sabrent side. But is it worth it? Do we get more performance? I don't know. If I plug this in up here now, it'll slide in. And I've got to use the screw that Sabrent has enclosed here, the last one, which I am assuming is going to be the right thread type and just be longer. I don't know. I've never seen one of these before. Never done this before. It's a little bit longer, about 3 times longer. And I'm probably going to need to get my flashlight so I can see what I'm doing. certainly doesn't help how dark it is outside right now. It's not helping my lighting. I'm going to just steal the standoff that I've got here because there's not one up there. So we're going to take the standoff that I was using, although I know I have a spare one in the box. We'll just use this one. I put it in there tight too. Let me put that screw down for a minute and take this out. No, it doesn't want to go. I think I'm going to need a straight edge for that. A flat blade driver. This one's kind of big. Will this work? Yep, that worked. And we'll take the Sabrent drive out for a moment, set it down so I can get in here and place this standoff right here. And we'll tighten that down just a little bit. That's good. Now, put the drive back in. That looks good. Normally you would do this with your case laying flat, so because the weight of this wants to drop it down, so it's sitting on a little bit of an angle, and I need to make sure when I tighten it down that it's completely straight in the socket. Times like this, I wish I had a cameraman so you could see better. We'll get there one day, but for right now, bear with me. The heatsink, the weight of it, and the size of it really do obscure what would ordinarily be a relatively quick procedure. And the lack of light is not helping matters. Boy, this does not want to even begin to get started. It may not have seated it correctly. Let me take another look at it here. It looks okay. I don't know. It appears that I've got to move the whole heatsink down a bit because this little half moon shape is sticking out too far, and it's the standoff is coming up to right about there. And I would imagine somewhere in the documentation it probably tells you how to align that. I was thinking it wasn't going to be that difficult. I thought that it would be obvious. But if it is obvious, I'm completely missing it. And by obvious, I mean that maybe there was some kind of a groove or a mark that would indicate where the end of the solid state drive were to be lined up before attaching the or securing the bracket to it. But it does appear that, if I had to guess, that the little half moon shape on the drive has to line up with the half moon shape on the bracket, which I think kind of sucks because the bracket itself, oh no, the bracket won't allow that. The bracket is got a raised lip on it. So maybe then the solid state drive just has to back up against that raised lip into the groove of the solid state drive that's normally used for this to guide the screw. Maybe it just needs to be moved just that little tiny bit. If you can see that, if the camera focuses, see those two circles there, the half moon on the edge of the drive versus the end of the bracket here. it can move about 1/8 of an inch this way. So with that as my guide, I'll just open this right back up. Although the thermal tape is a bit tacky, a bit sticky, it's not like glue or anything like that. So opening this back up to adjust it's no big deal. It's mostly an issue of, you know, not getting it right the first time, but I've never done it before, so it's perfectly understandable. I just can't get over how big that heatsink makes this M.2 drive. Now, you can buy the M.2 drive without the heatsink and save a few bucks. And we could use the built-in heatsink on the board, but clearly it's not going to work as well as this one. But in practical use, will it make any performance difference? If you're somebody who writes a lot of data constantly to your solid state drive, then yeah, you're going to be battling heat issues. If you're a regular user who on occasion copies big files, it's no big deal. Your drive will heat up and it'll cool right back down. Just kind of like revving the engine in your car will heat your engine up, but then idling or coasting will cool it back down again relatively quickly. Now, looking at the bracket, if we use the bracket as the guide, what I want to do is carefully pull this up away from the thermal tape, which is kind of sticky, and I want to slide the drive down right till it bumps up against the raised lip here on the bottom. You really can't see that raised lip, but what it's doing is it's preventing the drive from going any further back. Like that's as far as it's going to go. Right there it stops. Unless I sit it on top of it. If I place it on top, then it stops making contact with the thermal pad and it sits on an angle. And I can tell you that's not good. Maybe that's what they want you to do. I don't know. I'm kind of looking at it this way. Now that would be lined up perfectly, but it does have that raised lip that the solid state drive is now resting on. So in this case, a manual may be useful to help us guide through the installation if there's any sort of alignment that we have to worry about, or at least that they specify in the instructions, which I'm not seeing. I'm going to read these out to you because they don't look very useful, which is typically why I don't read them to begin with. So let me grab my glasses here. Okay. It says, make sure to remove the clear thermal tape protector from thermal tape. Yeah. Identify if you have a single-sided or double-sided. If your drive is single-sided, continue to step 4. If it's double-sided, skip to step 5. We are double-sided. There's chips on both sides. Place the SSD in the tray, so they're calling that piece a tray. Make sure the groove meant for the screw placed in the back of the drive is flush with the same groove that is on the back of the aluminum tray. So they do want it sitting on top of the lip. They want it flush. Attach the tray with the drive to the heatsink, ensuring the side with the uneven coils are on the back. On the side of the groove meant for the screw. That's some elegant writing. Let me read that again. Why don't you read the instructions? Because here's what they say. Attach the tray with the drive to the heatsink, ensuring that the side with the uneven coils are on the back on the side of the groove meant for the screw. Did you get all that? Does that make sense to any of you? One more time. Attach the tray with the drive to the heatsink, ensuring the side with the uneven coils are on the back on the side of the groove meant for the screw. What? Never to press twice flexible. That's terrible writing. It's terrible. And what's worse is I knew that and I did it anyway, just to prove a point. The side with the uneven coils. What? What difference does it make which side I use? Couldn't you just show me a picture of the... Look at it again. Now I'm getting upset. It's terrible. Oh, so on the picture, it's got these 3 copper pipes on one side and 2 copper pipes stick out, and the third one's recessed. It's got to be recessed to make room for the screw. That's essentially what they're saying, is they want that side to go towards the little half moon shape here so that the screw can be seated in there without any sort of obstruction from those heat pipes. Not exactly rocket science, right? I don't know why they had to phrase it like that. Okay, now I can put the screws back in to secure this down. So for those of you who want the best performance, that you think you're such a power user, that you're going to write all kinds of data and you're going to have heat issues, this is for you to go through all this hassle. For the rest of us, we can just buy this unit. It's a little cheaper. You slap it right in. Even the graphics card fits, where this one, the graphics card won't fit in that same slot. So it's less expensive, it's less trouble. There's no setup. You just plug it in and play it. This one, on the other hand, if you choose to get the heatsink for added cost, you also have added effort. It's significantly heavier. I need to get a scale out because this is like 5 or 6 times the weight of this one. It's a crazy difference in weight, which puts a lot of stress on this socket when you place it here when it's upright, which obviously, as I said, you wouldn't do yourself. I'm making a video, so I want to show you what I'm doing. So that's going to sit in there. And it's, I just feel like it's going to drop. I'm going to grab the replacement screw because it's so deep, the screw the motherboard includes is not going to work with it. They already know that. And now the screw looks like it's aligning much better now. I just need to see. It kind of feels like it's still not. Still not lined up properly. I mean, at least I can see it. And it does look like I can access it, but either the screw is too short. Give it one more shot. Or the screw is the wrong thread. Yeah, it ain't happening, folks. It is not going to fit. So what I think I need to do, first of all, is take the drive out and see if this screw will even go into this socket. It may be a different thread type. Let me just verify that first. Okay, it is the right thread type. It does go in. So now the question is, why can I not get the screw to get started when the drive is in place? And I don't know if it's an alignment issue or a depth issue, because with that lip on that the edge there, it's the wrong drive. With the end of the drive, as I showed you, there's a lip. It doesn't. It just doesn't seat all the way down. But I mean, that is aligned. So it should go in if the screw were long enough. So the only thing I can imagine is that the screw just isn't deep enough to reach, because it looks pretty well aligned from here. Wow. I can feel it. Let me show you. Because of the raised lip on the edge of this heatsink, if I put the screw right up against the solid state drive, even the screw they've included is not long enough. Which it's just, if it'll focus, that screw should be poking out through the top. It ain't doing it. So that means, once again, I have a couple choices. One, I don't have to use this heatsink, but if I paid extra for it, I'll be damned if I'm not going to use it. But that means I have to take it apart a third time and realign the solid state drive again. This time running it right up to the edge rather than on top of the little cutout. It's very confusing. You know, when they said the word flush, they don't really mean flush beside it or flush on top of it. So for those of us that are very literal, it's open to interpretation. And I don't like documentation that's open to interpretation. It should be very clear. It should be plain English, and it should have very clear photos or pictures, whether they're drawn. I mean, actual photos are always preferred. This is why I make videos, right? So you can follow along with me. You don't have to interpret what I'm saying so much as monkey see, monkey do, which is pretty basic learning, hence the name. So once again, see, even that's bad English. Is it once or is it again? Once again, pull this off of here, take the drive back off, separate that from the tape. Again, it's a little tacky, but it's not glue. Looking at that ridge one more time, I want to install the drive, again, with the label facing, it's going to face up. I'm going to put that in so it lines right up against the edge. Wait a minute. I'm sorry, the label's going to face, the label faces us, because when we set it down, it's going to go on top of the heatsink. Obviously, if you put it in upside down, it won't fit in the socket because there's a cutout right there, a key, and it won't go into the socket at all. That means you put your drive in upside down. So again, not the end of the world. You'll just have to take it back apart again. So where there are the 2 tubes sticking out instead of the 3, The two go towards where the securing screw is going to go. And once again, we're going to lock that back down. Ideally, there'd be some kind of a track or a notch or some indicator or a guide to help us align the solid state drive so that you didn't have to take it apart 3 times. Now, taking it apart 3, 4, 10, 15, 20 times doesn't hurt anything, but it does open the opportunity for accidental damage and mishandling, dropping, etc. But if everything's handled properly, you can do this any countless number of times without any concern of damage. It seems like a lot of effort and a lot of trouble to go through for a lot of money. Now, if the performance is otherworldly, and I guess it'll be worth it, but I suspect our performance is not going to be better. I think it's going to be identical to the Corsair MP600. But what I think could be completely wrong, and that's why we do it anyway, just to verify and to move forward with confidence. Now, this should fit. Let's see if that aligns any better. We're still aligned. Now, can I tighten the screw down this time? Does not appear to be possible. I still seem to be running into the same issue of the depth of the screw not being long enough. And again, if I set the screw in place so you can see it, I suspect we're right back to square one. So if the screw is placed underneath the drive, it ain't happening. It's just not going to happen. We have to go around the edge of the drive and get behind it. No, that's not going to secure it either. Boy, I'll tell you, that is one weird design. I'm not quite sure how they could have made it any more difficult. Like if they tried to make it more difficult, I'm not sure that it's possible to make it more difficult than this. It's like a series of experimentation of pulling the drive out, moving it just a little tiny bit forward or backward, securing it back down, seeing if it'll fit, and repeat as necessary until you get it right. That doesn't seem right to me. No, we don't have to use this heatsink. I've already got a perfectly good heatsink that came with the board, but clearly it doesn't have the weight and the capacity of heat dissipation that this large one has. But will they sit there in their marketing materials and tell you how much cooler this runs? There's really no mention of the difficulty in time that you have to invest to make it all fit together and work, or the obstruction to the graphics card that is a potential issue. There's a lot that's not talked about here. And again, you can order the drive without the heatsink. So if we evaluate the drive, we'd have been done by now. It's one screw, you pop it in, you're done. It's one of the easiest things to install on a motherboard, second only to a USB flash drive plugging in. Like, it's that easy. And they've taken something very, very easy and they've overcomplicated it in the name of performance, in the name of marketing, in the name of a premium price. And again, I suspect that we're going to see similar performance numbers on this drive as the Corsair. And the Corsair was first to market, so they've had time to improve upon what Corsair's done since they entered the market later with a Generation 4 NVMe drive. So it should be advancing forward, not taking a step backward. And clearly, if you had a laptop or a tablet that you wanted to replace the solid state drive in, There's no way you're putting this in there. That ain't happening. So be careful how you spend your money. You'll know ahead of time you can't use that, so don't pay for it. I want to try one last time, and if it doesn't work this time, we're just going to use it without the heatsink because it's not worth it. I truly believe that this has to go in and fit flush, and it's very confusing because if you look, they don't align at all. The slot, the little round circle, if I hold it on an angle, it kind of looks like they align, but it's sort of like an echo. It's this weird, I don't know. It's like the drive, the SSD has to be flat against the bracket, and this lip right here is lifting the drive up, and it appears to be interfering with the screw going in. So we'll keep the drive edge away. But that's just really bizarre. Now my question is, if I just hold it together, can I put the screw in now? So even in a best case scenario, the screw's not deep enough. And the reason the screw isn't deep enough, sorry, that's the wrong screw. Hold on. It's this screw here. Those screws hold the bracket on, so I wasn't making that mistake earlier in case you're curious. But that little lip, that raised lip, in a perfect scenario, you can see that only a couple of threads of that screw are going to stick up. And maybe that's all you're going to get. Maybe, you know, half a turn or a turn on the driver, which doesn't make me feel confident that the weight of this heatsink is going to be held in. Now, if that raised lip wasn't there, if the raised lip was on the opposite side, right, so it kind of hugged the standoff, that would make more sense to me. The fact that they've raised it, like to me, that makes more sense. It should go in this way because there's a recess right there. It seems to have been manufactured upside down. If we were going at this from this direction with that recess, then we'd have enough clearance, but the recess is on the other side. I don't know how well you can see that. It's very difficult for the camera to pick that up. So, I'm not going to be able to use this heatsink. It's just not going to work. And I'm just being objective here. The Corsair drive is cheaper. The heatsink is already installed, and the installation should take you less than 20 seconds. I've been on this more than 20 minutes, and I'm no closer to having it installed now than I was when I began. And I don't know that it's worth all the trouble, and it costs more money. It's like you're getting paid to be harassed. I can get harassed for free. If I put the drive bare into the socket right here, and we're going to use the screw that came out of there, to see. I can't see. Wow. Doesn't want to fit. It appears there's something just too thick about this drive. Let me use the screw that they've included just on the bare drive. Okay, so using their included screw, it does finally go in. The screw that Gigabyte includes for the M.2 drive is far too shallow for apparently a double-sided solid-state drive. Not very well thought out from either manufacturer as far as I can tell. I'm not going to secure the drive back in. I'm just going to plug everything back in so we can run the test and get on with this. Okay, here we go. Now in theory, this should boot up if Acronis did its job, and it should look exactly as it did before, except we're obviously going to have a lot less drive space. So you can see everything looks identical now with the new drive being cloned over, and we will probably see like a detected new hardware. That would be pretty common. We're also in a different M.2 slot, but that should not affect performance. And of course, the initial reason for moving that was because the heatsink was going to block the installation of the graphics card. I no longer need to have it in that slot, but it's the same performance regardless. So it's still an accurate and fair objective test. And we can still move it to the other slot if you don't believe me, but we're going to go ahead and run it here anyway because we're here. And I want to see what the numbers are compared to the MP600. We already know the drive's more money. And as a reminder, although I shouldn't be doing this while the test is running, as a reminder, we'll go over to pictures and we'll bring up the results from the MP600. Now initially, as I mentioned, a 1 terabyte drive will be a little bit slower than a 2 terabyte drive in solid state. And you can see the Sabrent drive, despite being half the size, was just a little teeny tiny bit faster than the larger 2 terabyte drive. So that means that Sabrent's technology is a little more advanced, except when we run the other tests where the Sabrent drive is slower. So again, depending on how you use the drive, if you're copying a lot of small files or if you're copying a lot of large files, if you're the average user, you're doing a little bit of everything all the time. And the Sabrent drive is not performing as well. We can clearly see that. Now the Sabrent drive may also be heating up while we're running these tests, which could be affecting its performance as well. Whereas the Corsair drive has that built-on pre-installed heatsink to help dissipate heat. In other tests I've read online regarding heatsinks and M.2 drives, they don't generally make that big of a difference, but they do make a slight difference. The numbers are almost imperceptibly different on the sequential reads and writes, which really doesn't justify Sabrent's premium price tag. I mean, we're looking at a $20 to $25 price differential between the two drives, and you'd think the more expensive drive would have some benefits like being easier to install. It's clearly not the case. Or maybe it's faster. Well, it's not $25 worth faster. It's barely perceptibly faster at all. These drives are nearly identical. Now, some people might look at 5 gigs a second and think that's impressive, but the fact is we're nowhere near the ceiling of Gen 4, which would be about 7.5. I think we should see speeds eventually when the technology catches up to the socket type, or not the socket type, but the Gen 4 technology. We should see right around 72 to 7,500. So 5,000 sort of the first generation of these solid state drives that are PCIe Gen 4. So we're fourth gen of PCIe, but first gen of the drives that work with Gen 4. And so there's some expansion yet ahead of us with optimizing and improving the speed. Versus on Gen 3, we're already saturating the bus limit at 3,500. 3,500, 3,600 is the most you're going to get out of it. That's as much traffic as the data lanes can handle. So the data lanes on Gen 4 are much bigger, and we're not consuming the whole lane. We have room to grow here as the technology evolves. So there's our final comparison between the two drives with the numbers are very, very similar across the board. And I can't help but wonder, because I was loading this image, if my using the computer has impacted these two results. So I'm going to run the test one more time. And while we're waiting for the test, if anybody has any questions for me right now, any technical questions, I'd be happy to address them. And I want to thank Sabrent for sending me the drive, and I will share the video with them, and we'll find out if I'm doing something wrong, or if perhaps that part that goes on the bottom of the heatsink was manufactured backwards. I want them to see the struggles I'm having and to give them an opportunity to address those, and then I will follow up in the future when I hear back from them and tell you what they say. Corey says, I've got a problem in Windows 10. When I try to transfer files from my hard drive to a flash drive, the transfer speed goes to 0 and stops. You could have a bad flash drive, so I would advise you to try a different flash drive and to try a different USB port. Yeah, as I suspected, the numbers that are showing up now are more what I was expecting. I think because I was using the computer to load the image from the previous test, it interfered with my test results, which makes sense because I was distracting the computer by adding another task. So these numbers, again, as I predicted, are almost imperceptible between the two drives. The technology is the technology. It's not better than what we have available. And the Corsair MP600 already was doing this. So for Sabrent to come into the market now, I think Sabrent needs to offer something, some incentive for us to purchase their drive. If you're going to match us on the performance, Instead of giving us a big, bulky, and impractical heatsink, which adds difficulty to the installation, why not bring the price down below the MP600 and focus on a price point, since the performance difference is they're so close as to allow room for error that either drive could perform these same exact numbers depending on the specific conditions at the moment of the test. If I run the same test on the same drive 3 times in a row, I will get 3 different sets of numbers, but all within a certain range. And all I'm telling you is they'll all fall into the same range with either drive. There's no perceptible difference in the results of any of these tests. They're all nearly identical. So why am I paying more for it? Why is the installation so difficult? And how important is that heatsink? Because clearly it's running fine without it. Can you place a cooling fan on the SSD? They do have fans for RAM, which I never install because I think they're ugly and unnecessary. And I imagine somebody's probably got one out there somewhere, but I think it'd be profoundly stupid. This obsession people have with heat with their computer is very strange to me. If we were having a heat issue with the solid state drive, it would be represented in the performance numbers, which, as you can tell, the Corsair MP600 has the built-in heatsink. The Sabrent is running bare without any heatsink, and you can see it has not affected our numbers. You'd have to seriously be running a ton of data to this drive to be impacted by that. You would be such a hardcore power user. It's highly unlikely you're watching my channel for advice, because if you're that kind of user, you probably know more than I do. And I'm not here to make videos for those people. They already know everything. I think for the average user, it's an imperceptible difference and an added complexity to the installation over something that looks more impressive than it actually benefits or provides to you in return. It's sort of like having muscles but having no strength. It's a very strange situation here. Ghost Shadow says they do make NVMe coolers with built-in microfans. I have no doubt they make hubcaps for lawnmowers too. The people that would benefit from that would be very few and far between. But if there's a sucker to buy it, I'm sure there's a manufacturer who'll make it. Water-cooled mouse. You know what? I bet you if they made it, there'd be people who bought it. Sharon says they should also make ashtrays for motorbikes. Exactly. Exactly. Brad says the instructions say to not use the extra thermal strip on the bottom when you have a double-sided SSD. Well, that could explain the length of the screw not reaching through, because that thermal pad adds a little bit of distance on the solid state drive. On the other hand, without the thermal pad, what's the point of the heatsink by just contacting it directly like that, surely it's still going to transfer heat better than without it, but it would transfer heat even better with some form of thermal compound or material to assist in the heat transfer. I mean, would you put a bare heatsink on top of your CPU with no thermal material, but it's okay to do that with an SSD? What's the point? Let me take another look. Maybe this other thermal pad is thinner. No, it looks exactly the same. And for the record, I didn't attach this thermal pad. This is pre-applied. I didn't put it on there. So how can you tell me not to use it when it was already applied? If it's optional, then it should be separate to use if needed. It should not already be pre-applied. Furthermore, Sabrent sold me the SSD and they sold me the heatsink and they sell them together as a kit. Yet you're telling me out of the box it's not compatible without modification from the end user to go with the very thing they sold me to pair with it? How does that make any sense to anybody? So now I'm very curious if what you're saying is they want you to use the extra thermal pad on a single-sided, but not to use the extra thermal pad on a double-sided. That, I think you're, again, this goes back to poorly written directions if it can be misinterpreted in the way that you've indicated in the chat room. If your drive is a single-sided drive, apply the extra thermal tape provided. If your drive is single-sided, apply the extra. I did not apply the extra. I didn't do it. So implying I didn't follow the directions or do it properly is kind of offensive. But I understand the directions are like typical technical directions that people have a hard time interpreting. These instructions are not well written. And the way that they show the picture here shows that the cutout in the drive aligns perfectly flush and flat with the cutout in the bracket. And yet the bracket has metal cut up. So it's got a lip on it that prevents that drive from ever sitting flush. So it may be a defect in manufacturing, but that means every one they made came out that way. You're not just going to get one punched out wrong. Either that or you've got a very old manufacturing process because today everything's automated and everything's done the same. So if you screwed it up on one, you've screwed it up on all of them. So again, I'll bring it up to Sabrent. Let's go ahead and take a screenshot and capture this. We'll label this. We'll call this Sabrent 1 TB Rocket NVMe 4.0. Yeah, that looks good. Function Alt print screen. Okay. All right, we'll go back to the main camera full screen. All right, it looks like a couple of contributions have come in while I was working over here. So a quick shout out and thank you to Hugh Wong, contributed $2. He says, I'm having a Coca-Cola and hanging out watching CH. And another $2. He says, how about a camera mount on shoulder with laser? Is such a thing made? Adam Sleeth contributed $10 and says, I'm enjoying the builds. Abdul Azim Patel with a contribution of $14.99. He says, do you sell Office Pro Plus? I don't sell Microsoft Office now. Joseph Joseph Jacobiak has contributed $5. He says, have another Coke. Hey, thank you, Joseph. Sorry I have butchered your last name. Dylan Butler with a $2 contribution. He says, your thought process really helps me learn. Thank you. Thank you, Dylan. And Joe Bush with a $4.99 contribution. He says, I'm sorry I'm late, Teach. I don't feel tardy. Yeah, so that pretty much, I think, sums it up. I think I made the right decision when I selected the Corsair MP600 for this build. I'm not sure that the Sabrent option was available, but even if it was, for the price difference, I'm glad I went the way I went. If I was given a choice currently with the information and experience that I have just had live on camera with you guys, I got to say that the Corsair's cheaper, faster, less obtrusive, less weight on the socket. No special screw is needed to install. You use the screw that came with your motherboard. Everything fits all of the current standards followed by other motherboard manufacturers. Sabrent has stepped outside of that accepted standard. They're charging you more money for it, and it's creating issues. I just don't get it. Furthermore, the installation instructions are poorly written. They're open to interpretation, as was unscripted. You saw it live here in the chat. And perhaps even a manufacturing error in that it's impossible for the drive to sit flush, resulting in the screw that they have included, knowing that they've reached outside of the normal accepted standards, that they have to provide you with a separate screw that's longer, still isn't long enough. It's preposterous. Again, there may be some part of this that I'm missing, and I will present this video to Sabrent for their evaluation, and I will share with you what they've got to say in return. My thank you to them for sending it. I appreciate the opportunity to test it. I'm just a little disappointed. I was expecting better from Sabrent at that price point. So my thanks to all of you for joining me tonight. We're going on about 2 hours and 30 minutes for today's live broadcast. I hope you've enjoyed it and maybe learned a little something along the way. My thanks to all the contributors during tonight's broadcast, and that includes Joe Bush, Dylan Butler, Joseph Jakubiak, Abdul Azim Patel, Adam Sleuth, Hugh Wong, Jean Tem, Daniel Schroeder, Michael Okonkwo, Jean Tem again, David R. Officer, Rick Cezabo, The Brain 49, Michael Dane, Mira Ora, Kevin Arsenault, Joseph Panariello, Tina McLaughlin, Anthony Pagenkopf, John Craig, William Cregan, Hugh Wong again, Richard Angeline, Mike Yazzie, as well as Thomas Beckenstowe, again from Thomas Beckenstowe, and the first contribution today from Mira Ora. Thank you guys so much for helping to keep me sponsor free so I can be free to say what I want, unfiltered, without threat of funding being removed or, having to be a controlled mouthpiece. It is, there's no shortage of that here on YouTube. So to be able to speak my mind and still have the funds to be able to do some high-end stuff like this, I enjoy it. I'm glad you guys see value in it, and I can't wait to see what's coming up next. I have a couple other products waiting to be reviewed. I've got a couple of bills that need to be done, And I've got Steve Bass coming back, I think next week, to talk about some stuff I sent to him to review. In fact, I sent Steve the very keyboard and mouse I use. Steve's still using, we'll call it a classic keyboard and mouse. And as somebody who is a writer, your keyboard is very important. So I wanted to bring Steve into the 21st century with some modern technology. We tend, as human beings, we find something we like and we stay with it. And I want to get Steve's opinion to see if he'll embrace and see the value and the comfort and the evolution of the keyboard and mouse since the technology that he's come to embrace. I'm very curious if he'll embrace and see the value in the new stuff, or if it'll further strengthen his hold on the old stuff. As we get older, the resistance to change gets stronger. Our level of being uncomfortable or to adapt and change to something else, for most of us, becomes a form of resistance. It's uncomfortable. It's not pleasant. But I have found that most of this new tech stuff is actually far superior, more comfortable. It's faster, it's more reliable, and especially with a keyboard. The keyboard I'm using is very comfortable, and I think far better than the classic Keytronic stuff and all the high-end, super expensive, DOS keyboard and stuff. I think what I've got is far superior. And I've gone through a number of keyboards. It wasn't just like I just grabbed any one and said that one's better. I went through about 10 before I found one I liked. Now I'm curious what Steve's opinion of it is. So I hope you'll join me for that. We'll talk about that and a couple other items I sent him for review. And then his next visit after that, we're going to do a build side by side. Him in California, me in Arizona. We're going to build the same identical system together. I'm just looking to see if there's any final little questions or anything I can address in the chat before I wrap it up for tonight. But I think everybody's pretty much saying goodbye to me here, so that's good. We'll wrap it up here before I start up on another rant. We'll save it for next time. Again, thanks to all of you for watching. Thanks to everybody for contributing. Thanks to my friends there in blue in the chat room for helping to keep it civil and shutting down the spammers, the scammers, and the haters right away, so that we can keep this community a friendly and supportive place. And I very much appreciate your help with keeping that under control. So that's it for this Friday night. I will see you all again very, very soon. Stay safe. And I'm stalling to find my outro. There it is. All right. I'll see you again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.